The Weekly Hugh Demon. Full steam ahead.
If you want an intellectual experience that's kind of a wild ride, check out the 1908 book by G.K. Chesterton, Orthodoxy. It's widely considered like a classic of modern Catholic apologetics, even though Chesterton wrote it like 15 years before he became Catholic. It's an excellent book, frustrating little book. It's filled with paradox and sudden twists and turns and lots of detours. He kind of rambles at points, but check it out. I definitely encourage you to sit down and wrestle with it, maybe for a couple weeks. But the reason I bring it up is because in chapter 2, he talks about a thing he calls the maniac. He talks about why it's basically so hard to deal with the maniac. He goes, people think maniacs are insane, in the sense that they're wildly illogical, whatever. He goes, that's not true at all. He goes, a maniac is very, very logical. The problem with the maniac, he has this very narrow worldview, or this one or two facts, quote-unquote facts, that he latches onto, and then everything feeds into that box. Get to him, you have to kind of smash the box. And it's a tight little box, because it's a real narrow worldview. And he said that's what makes the maniac so hard to reason with, is because he's reasoned it through, based on his worldview, his one or two quote-unquote facts. How can you get around that? I mean, any evidence you give him to the contrary is just going to feed back into his premise. So if I go to him and say, look, I've been your friend for years, I'm not to get you. And he'll be like, yeah, that's exactly what you would say, because you're not part of the conspiracy to get me. So anything you say to this guy is he can either explain it away with his one or two principles that, are too narrow to encompass all of reality, or worse, it feeds back into his whole theory. Yeah, that's exactly what you'd say, Shesky, because you're out to get me, and everyone's out to get me, therefore everyone's going to deny it. So of course, you just said exactly what you'd say if you're part of it, thereby substantiating my theory. Okay. Now, take that maniac and expand it. Let's say there are a group of maniacs. There's 1,000 of you, whatever. It's the exact same concept. It's everyone's out to get us. Or maybe it's a bunch of people are out to get us. And here's what I want you to start latching on to what I'm trying to make you see. When you have this stilted type thinking, so you have this group of maniacs, they have their little box, their little worldview, and they all ascribe to this little worldview, and then through this worldview, they basically break people up into three types. You got the people who are out to get us, so you have the they, and you have the us, and then you might have a third type of person, if they're not completely nuts, who will think that, well, there are people out there like Shesky who's not out to get us, but he's ignorant. So he doesn't understand like we understand it, that they're out to get us. He's not actually out there to get us, so he's innocent. But, he's maybe part of the problem because he doesn't understand what we understand. Furthermore, when you have that group of maniacs, often the they is going to be vague. If you can actually really define who they is as out to get them, and this is absolutely crucial, if you can put that they on trial, identify them by name, you can explode their worldview. So it's always got to be vague. Okay? This is very close to conspiracy theorists. I mean, think about it. Okay, you have a conspiracy theorist. You have like the three types of people. You got us who understand that the conspiracy, what's going on here, the Bilderberg Society or 9/11, whatever it is. You have the conspirators who are out for this nefarious, insidious purpose, what they're trying to do, world domination, whatever it is. And then you got the dupes. You got the Sheskys out there who don't understand the conspiracy. Yes, he's not one of the conspirators. That's good. He's innocent in that sense. But it's frustrating that he doesn't see it like we see it. And then everything you try to tell them, to try to explode their theory of the conspiracy, it doesn't work because it just feeds back into, their little worldview, their little box of reality. And again, I use reality in quotes. So you try to point out that, hey, we got pictures of the moon landing. And they're like, yeah, it's all doctored. and further, it's kind of, they explain it away as being doctored, or it feeds back into the whole conspiracy theory. It's like, yeah, those are actually very, very good pictures. Therefore, there must be people at the various highest levels perpetuating this moon landing hoax, because they are very sophisticated and they're very broadly published, and therefore that shows there is indeed a very vast conspiracy to push the whole moon landing. And it's like, man, it's really hard to deal with those people. It's exhausting. And that'd be kind of, I'd say, the fourth thing about the group of maniacs or the conspiracy people is, the fourth characteristic is they're exhausting. So again, the four crucial characteristics is, there's three types of people: the they, us, and the innocent. The they is always amorphous. You can't really identify it. You can't put it on trial. You can't punish them. It's always just very vague and shadowy. Three, they're very logical. They have their one or two quote-unquote facts. They have their little box worldview of reality. And within that, they're very logical. And it's very hard to penetrate, to smash that box, to get into that box. And four, they're just freaking exhausting to deal with. In all of this, you have the whole theory of white privilege. I mean, you basically have the group of maniacs and the conspirators all rolled into one. I mean, let's look at it. You get the three types of people. You got the us, they, and the innocent. So, the person of color who says, you just don't, you don't get it. There's this whole system, and you guys are privileged. You don't understand this everyday life, whether it's not being stopped by a cop or someone crossing the street when they see you walking towards you, whatever it is. You just don't see it. So you're like, you might be innocent in the sense that you're not persecuting us, but someone is. So you got the they who are persecuting us. You got us who are being persecuted, and you got the innocent. Now, if you're a white person, by the way, and you buy into this, you're close to like the conspiracy people. Okay? Because you're saying there is the they who are persecuting, there's this overall conspiracy to persecute them, and we see it, and there may be those who don't see it, the innocents. But they similarly, they divide people into three types of people as well. And again, here it's a little bit different, because there's 3 or 4 different people, depending whether you're white and you buy into the whole white privilege concept, or whether you're black and you buy into the white privilege concept. Anyway, but secondly, you got the amorphous they. With white privilege, theoretically, I believe it ties back into the thoughts of de Saussure. He is a structuralist philosopher who basically said there really is no objective truth. All you have is a web of words, and they all relate to each other. And these words then form like a societal construct. And everything operates within that construct. And over the course of 300 or 400 years of white hegemony, because of Europe's power, and let's face it, disproportionate power on the world stage since about 1500 through gunpowder or whatever else, they have this white structure that privileges whites over blacks and people of color. Well, it doesn't get much more amorphous or vague than that. I mean, you have an enemy there that really is just too vague to, to even name. So again, you have that amorphous enemy. You got that like in spades with the whole white privilege concept. And then, most importantly, logically, you can't get to them. Everything you say to the contrary, the person who buys into the whole white privilege conspiracy theory, if you buy into that theory, anything you tell them to the contrary, they can either explain it away or it's more evidence. So if you have some guy who says, hey, look at my dad left my mom when I was, 5 years old, and we had to scrape for everything we had, and I have busted my hump and put myself through college, and now I have a wife and I have 2 kids, and I've scraped together this $20,000 worth of savings. And it's like, yeah, exactly. And because you're white, because the way the structure is set up in your favor, you're able to rise above your horrible beginnings. That's why you're able to do it. So don't tell us that's evidence that there is no white privilege. The fact that you were crapped on your entire life and had to work for every penny you have. That doesn't refute white privilege. That just shows white privilege because you're able to pull it off, whereas a black guy couldn't. To be honest with you, I don't know how they explain away the many black people who've done similar things. Joe Rogan will often have him on his show. Black guys who are obviously making it. Well, I mean, Dave Chappelle, I think he puts himself out there as, he says he is very poor. His recent Netflix special, by the way, is freaking hilarious. But It's like, I don't know how to explain it away. Dave Chappelle. Maybe he thinks like a white guy, whatever. They're first part of white privilege. I'm not sure. But anyway, whatever you tell them, they explain away in this little worldview of white privilege, and you can't penetrate it. And then the fourth trait is, it's exhausting. I had been asked a couple times, hey, you should address this whole concept of white privilege. And I'm just like, oh man, yeah, but it's just gonna be so freaking exhausting to lay it out. I mean, honest with you, I had to start this segment of the podcast 3 times to get it right, because it's just, dealing with these idiots is just really, really tiring, and you gotta work it through. But, the bottom line is, I'd say epistemologically speaking, their theory of knowledge, how they think, what they see, it's extremely similar to the conspiracy theorists, and also to the group of maniacs, as Chesterton would have envisioned it. I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I'm talking like literally technical sense, chapter 2 of Orthodoxy. The white privilege people are like the maniac and the conspiracy people combined. You're maniacs if you're like of color and feel like you're persecuted. That puts you like in the group of maniacs. But if you're a white person, you're like the conspiracy theorists. You don't personally feel persecuted because you're part of the privilege, but you see it and you see this big conspiracy out there. And again, very exhausting to deal with. I want to get into other problems with white privilege. I'll probably save that to next week. This segment's gone on too long already. Alright, let's do some lightning segments. Hey, I'm going to start off by plugging a book I've already plugged once, maybe twice. But I'm going to plug it times 5 right now. I'm going to nominate this book as the greatest history book of all time. What I mean by that is, it's funny. It's exceedingly well written. It's pithy. It's easy to read front to back or pick up and read at random. It's heavily biographical, which I enjoy. And I'm talking about Bill Kaufman's Look Homeward, America. I started picking this book up again a couple weeks ago and reading from it. And it's probably the 3rd, 4th, 5th time I've picked it up and read it. I read it front to back when I first got it. Just loved it. And I've been going back and reading it ever since. But it is just a great, great book. On top of all those other traits, it has the added trait that it'll bust your worldview, or your American view, I should say. It's all about America, what it means to be an American, and it's going to open up to you a whole line of thinking and a whole way of being American that you're just not going to see today. And if you're like me, when I first read this book when I was like 40, 45 years old, I wasn't even really aware of. Actually, I was, because I've always been kind of a student of political philosophy, so I'm very acquainted with like the 1920s and 30s conservatism, like Albert J. Nock and things like that. So I was somewhat versed in this area, but not like this, not the way Bill Kaufman brings it together. I just highly, highly urge you to get it. I think it'll expand your view of what it means to be an American. And I'll tell you right now what it stands for is, Kaufman said you got the people on the left who hate America. They look at it as just an extension of European colonialism and white privilege or whatever you have, and they want to tear down what America is. But that doesn't mean you have to go bomb the hell out of the third world countries and engage in all these foreign wars. It probably just means we kind of need to keep to ourselves more, be a little more modest, be a little more humble. And so this is like a third way. Yeah, so Bill Kaufman's not a leftist by any stretch. But at the same time, he applauds people like Dorothy Day, who acknowledge there are some questions here about how America is where it is today, why America is doing the things it's doing today, whether it's dropping the bomb on Hiroshima or beating the living hell out of Afghanistan for 20 years, whatever it is. Because, these things can be questioned without becoming a bad American. Because then you got the people on the far right, I didn't say far right, just say on the right, who basically talk in terms of, we gotta have this strong military, and gotta beat the hell out of third world countries because they're out to get us. And it's just like, let's not do that either. Anyway, so Kaufman kind of explodes this whole American dichotomy as I see it today. This is like a third way of looking at things. Again, Look Homeward, America by Bill Kaufman. I think you'll love it. Hey, big news. Duolingo now has a Latin program. So for all you papists out there, go download the Duolingo Latin program. I actually self-taught myself a semester of Latin back when I was in college. Don't remember hardly anything, so I downloaded it, took the first lesson. Yeah, anything like Duolingo, it's really easy. It's pretty cool, so definitely recommend it. Maybe you can go to some of those Latin masses and actually follow along a little bit. So, daughter Meg is a freshman at Hillsdale College. And here it is Labor Day weekend, and she has classes on Labor Day. Hillsdale does not recognize Labor Day as a holiday. That just kills me. Labor Day is like a movement of big labor. The AFL-CIO, things like that. Definitely a very leftward-leaning holiday, to say the least. Now, I will say, it's not as bad as many people think. I believe it came in under Grover Cleveland, who was pretty conservative, and there was the worker movement, the socialist movement wanted to be May Day. Just like in communist Russia, they want to establish a May Day holiday here in America. And Grover Cleveland's like, we ain't having that. But there was this pressure to have some sort of holiday. So he said, hey, first Monday of September, we'll have Labor Day. But it ain't the socialist type of Labor Day. It's more of a celebration of everyone who works type thing. So it's kind of a compromise. But it was a compromise with communists. And so I'm guessing Hillsdale College will have nothing to do with it. In that vein, I always go on to work at least a little bit on Labor Day. Just out of spite. Hey, big news from all my homosexual listeners. Marvel's going to have its first openly gay superhero. I don't even want to imagine what his superpower is. maybe this is the Marvel superhero Thud. It's whack. One guy says, a gay superhero is like the mind boggles and the anus quivers. Sorry if that's over the top for you, but so many jokes, so little time, and I try to keep this podcast, somewhat urbane, and I realize I probably just failed big time, but kind of reminds me of Chesterton. He wrote an essay, something about in praise of the buffoon or something like that, where he's basically talking about how you got kind of, if you have something you want to say and you think you have something to impart to people, you may have to make it funny in order to do it. And that's that's why I kind of try to do that here. And I find myself, quite frankly, often wanting to entertain or make people laugh, and I'm not sure what that is. I don't know if it's narcissistic or desire to please people, whatever it is. But my apologies if the humor ever goes over the top for you. So a listener to this podcast tells me he just had his first baby. And he says it's kind of bummer. It was a real rough pregnancy, or really rough labor, over 48 hours. And finally they said, look, we got to take the baby. So she had to have a C-section. And he's asking about it. I told him, well, no, so Maria, I said, our first baby was C-section, then we had 6 more, all vaginal. I said, it wasn't a big deal at all. I mean, it's a concern, but no. And he was really relieved to hear that. And I said, it's going to be kind of disconcerting. And I'll warn you right now is when my second kid was born, Abby, when she was on her way, that nurses are running around really concerned, saying, we got a VBAC, we have a VBAC, VBAC this, VBAC that. And finally I was like, what the frick is VBAC? They kept saying that term. I had no idea what they're talking about. They said, oh, VBAC, VBAC. It's vaginal birth after cesarean. And I was like, that's it? I said, what's the big deal? She and I had VSAC. Hey, a note I meant to make last week when I was talking about Mackinac Island. If you're at a hotel, you need to tip the chambermaids. Always leave money. If you believe in tipping at all, tip the chambermaids. For some reason, I've had a large number of hotel clients. I just kind of top heavy. How many hotels I've represented over the past 25 years of my practice. And I've reviewed the economics of running a hotel. And one thing's become very clear to me: the cleaning ladies, the people you see work in those rooms, they're at the very bottom of this economy's pay structure. I remember one guy telling me point blank, he goes, yeah, well, a good chambermaid, she can make as much as $10 an hour. She's really diligent and she works hard. Not counting tips, because they get paid by the room. So depending on what type of shape you leave your room, that plays into how much she makes. In that regard, by the way, don't trash your room. That's just a total dick thing to do. Try to leave it reasonably neat. These women get paid piece rate. They get paid per room. The more trash you leave your room, the less money they make, and they ain't making much money to begin with. So also leave a tip. I try to leave $5 and then whatever changes in the room. If you want a more reference, you might be thinking, Chesky, that's nothing. It's like, well, yeah, but you gotta see the dives I stay in. It's like half the night's rent. Hey, I don't know what it is with Skittles, but they are grossing me out. First off, for years now, they've had that advertisement with those two kids standing there, and that kid has Skittles all over his face, and she picks off this thing and eats it like a scab. That's just gross as hell. It's like, gosh, that's just disgusting. And now they have an advertisement where they show some dude apparently milking a giraffe, but you don't see him milking it. All you can see is hands down near the giraffe's genitals, and then pushing out a Skittle and popping it in his mouth. And for all I can tell, it's coming out of his dick or something. It's just like, what? Who is doing the Skittles commercials to turn my stomach? First off, he has something coming out of the giraffe's genitals that he's popping in his mouth. And then another one, this girl's eating a scab off some dude's face. Whoever's doing the Skittles marketing, man, they gotta get their head examined. I mean, I don't think I'll ever eat a Skittles the rest of my life. So I'm seeing more and more references to young people being drawn to socialism. One article I read talked about how the Ayn Rand Society, the Objectivist Society, is having troubles finding young acolytes because they're not interested in capitalism and objectivism anymore. They're more interested in socialism. And it just really astounds me. So I'm listening earlier this week to a lecture on Marxism, one I listened to a couple of times, and I guess I never appreciated this lecture. Who seems like a pretty decent guy. But he says, I know socialism's been thoroughly discredited, because of the USSR and, Pol Pot and China, etc., etc. But, it's a fair question to ask, has, Marxism really been tried? He goes, and I don't think it really has. He goes, because Marx, he himself would have been appalled by the despotic regimes of Stalin and Mao. He goes, he would have been appalled by it. He goes, Marx was for freedom and human flourishing, and he would have been appalled at what Stalin did. He goes, so you can't say that, his system was really tried. And this guy's a college professor, and I'm just like, yeah. And by the way, not a nutty college professor, not like some of these nut jobs I hear about at Duke University and Harvard. I forget the guy's name, but he seemed like a pretty decent guy. And I was like, well, yeah, you can. And the best analogy I come up with is like, if Rachel Ray comes up with this delicious cookie, and it just looks absolutely freaking great, and people bake it, and then people get really freaking sick, and some people die, and then it happens over and over again. It's like, let's break apart these ingredients, and what the frick is in it, and it turns out, you have in it hemlock, strychnine, curare, and arsenic. Okay? And that's kind of what Marxism is. It's like, no, we don't need to try it again. The death, the suffering, the poverty, it is baked into the product. All those things are baked into Marxism, just like arsenic or curare or hemlock or strychnine would be into just a horrible, horrible cookie recipe. Okay, so you say, okay, Chesky, what the frick are you talking about? Because I tell you right now, by the way, I'm talking like close, like an allegory, like a direct parallel here, not just not an analogy. I'm talking, these are things that are really close. And it's like, you can't have a free and flourishing society under Marxism any more than you can have a healthy cookie with strychnine and arsenic. So I say there's 4 things, and it's probably more than that, but 4 things I can think of that are baked into the ingredients of Marxism that makes it poison. First off, politics. Marxist was a political philosopher. Yes, he engaged in some metaphysical philosophy. His concept of alienation, I actually kind of buy into a little bit. I hate to say it, but he was first and foremost a political revolutionary. He took concrete steps to bring about the revolution. He wanted politics to take over. So if you want politics, you want to put men in power to make men free, that's like putting arsenic in the cookie to make it taste good, to make people healthier. If you have the government in power with guns, then the people under them are not going to be free. I mean, it's that simple. So right in the very first premise, it's baked right in there. It ain't going to work. Because you're putting government in power through political means to make people free. And once men are in power, being fallen human beings, they're never going to give up that power. So that's, I'd say, the hemlock in the system. Okay, the strychnine. The strychnine, that's Lenin. Even Marx, too. In fact, I gotta do a segment on what a son of a bitch Marx was. But this one's gonna be too long as it is. But you look at Lenin. Lenin was just a son of a bitch. The guy himself was a mass murderer and had a network of spies. The problem is when you have a political system like that where everything has to be seized for the good of the common man, the person who thinks himself worthy to do it is going to be a prick. And this is the type of dude you wouldn't want in charge of your intramural basketball league. That is the type of son of a bitch you're dealing with here. You don't want this type of person in charge. The person who thinks he's smart enough, powerful enough, strong enough, charismatic enough, whatever it is, if he has that high of opinion that he thinks he can take the reins of power and bring about the selfless society and remake mankind, that's the type of son of a bitch you don't want to have control over anything. So I'd say that's like the strychnine in the system. The person who pulled this off has to be a son of a bitch. The chiare, the third type of poison, is you have to abolish private property. That's a huge freaking deal, folks. I mean, you really think about abolishing private property, you don't have anything left. Private property is the great bulwark against government oppression. If you don't have private property, government oppression is that much more likely. So again, baked right into the ingredients. And the fourth thing, the arsenic. And this one's a little more involved, but if you have central planning like you do in a Marxist system where you have the government take over everything, you're getting rid of the pricing mechanism. And here you're getting into, some Austrian economics and you maybe, kind of lost in the weeds, but you gotta understand the importance of the pricing mechanism. It can't be controlled. It is what it is. And it sends information out to a huge network of mankind. The whole United States economy, the world economy with its millions of facets. It all relies on the pricing system to tell you what's working and what's not, how much to charge, how to allocate resources. It tells you how to do that. If you don't have the pricing mechanism, and central planning by its nature gets rid of it because it allocates resources where the head honcho, the dude in charge of the intramural basketball league, the resources go where he tells it to go, not what the pricing mechanism is saying where it should go. And that's huge. And as the pricing mechanism breaks down under central planning, the central planner has to get more and more oppressive to shove his ideas into the forefront. He has to get more and more tyrannical. And that is, by the way, Hayek's Road to Serfdom. Always worth checking out. Anyway, so, like I said, socialism cannot be tried. Marxism cannot be tried again. We just don't need another 100, 200 million people dead. We just don't need it. And the fact that young people are embracing socialism is just shocking. It reminds me, by the way, of Thanos in the Avengers Endgame, or not Endgame, I forget what it's called. The Avengers movie where Thanos wins out. It was like a shock poll where something like 30% of youth thought Thanos was right. He needed to do that. I have zero proof for this, but I'll bet $100. I'll give you a 4-to-1 odds. My $100 to your $25 that there is a humongous overlap between the young people who thought Thanos was onto something and those who think socialism is worth trying again. Because you want to try socialism again. I'm just like, what, 100 million dead isn't enough for you? I'm like, oh yeah, but, it's worth trying. Another 100 million might die, but we might get it right this time. It was like Thanos may have been right, to wipe out half of mankind. Again, it's scary. Again, but I don't think it's a big coincidence that a significant portion of young people are ready to try socialism, and a significant portion of young people thought Thanos was onto something. Highly, highly troubling. Alright, that's a wrap for this week. Please follow us on Twitter, check out the Facebook page, go to the blog, check out udemonpodcast.com. There's all sorts of information over there that you might find interesting. As always, thanks for listening.